Okay, so let me get this straight. The same party that spent 40 years screaming about local control is now dragging city mayors in front of Congress because those cities won't do ICE's paperwork for them. Truly shocking stuff. So, this past April 16th, House Judiciary holds a hearing called The Human Toll of Sanctuary Policies. Jasmine Crockett stands up and, in my opinion, absolutely dismantles the whole premise in 4 minutes. If local control is sacred, why are you telling cities how to run their cops? Hit subscribe. You'll want the breakdown after.
Thank you so much. And I hear your rage. And I don't have children and literally have never lost a child nor had one injured to actually, really be in your shoes. But one thing that I can tell you about the redirection is because so often what we see happen is politicians play games. The reality is that if you are talking about a sanctuary city, then we're talking about city government. We're talking about local control, something that the Republicans used to espouse that they believed in. They used to believe in whoever lives in that city, you elect who is going to run that city. And that city, whether it's the police department, which is the police department and law enforcement that make the decisions about what they do. We don't pick the police chief for any given city. Not on the federal level. That comes from the city level. That comes from whoever the people of that city actually elect to represent them. I believe in local control. Same thing, I live in Texas too. And baby, I wish I didn't have to deal with Governor Greg Abbott, but local control dictates that he is the governor of our state. And therefore, we have state reps, we have state senators, and we have a governor, and we have county elected officials and city elected officials. We are sitting in Washington, D.C. right now. We are on the federal level. So what I believe in is something that the Republicans used to scream, which is local control. So when we're having a conversation and a hearing about the human toll, the title specifically is The Human Toll of Sanctuary Policies, Stories from Victims and Families, my deal is we aren't the ones that decide what cities do. So what they've decided to do is they've decided to play on your pain. And that is why I am frustrated. Because hear me when I say this. I have seen people, whether it was an American citizen or not, that killed your child or harmed your child, I believe it's wrong. To me, it wouldn't have made it any less painful. And I could be wrong, again, because I don't have any kids. But if for some reason it had been a U.S. citizen that ended up harming or killing your child, the pain would still be there. It would still hurt. So the reality is that what we need to do is make sure we are protecting everybody in this country. I don't wake up and somehow people look and see that there's a D somewhere around my head or something, and so therefore I am going to somehow be precluded from harm becoming me. When I go out to do policy work, and I've worked on the state level too, the policies that I was writing when I was on the state level are different from the federal level because we have different levels of control. The one thing that we do have control of, you may have recognized that the DHS secretary, as we're talking about immigration, she had to come before this committee. I want to say maybe a day or two after she came before our committee, because we have jurisdiction over her. We don't have jurisdiction over your mayors. We have jurisdiction over her. She lost her job. The DHS secretary is gone. Now, to be clear about this, the Republican president is the one that put her out of her job because she was failing. So the reason that my colleagues have brought these things up, and this isn't to say that the harm and the hurt that you are feeling, that you should not be feeling that. It is wrong. Again, even as a criminal defense attorney, I can't tell you how many times I was begging clients to enter pleas. In fact, it literally made me remember a case that I had with a guy who was a veteran. He had served this country. He ended up being put on some new medication, and he also ended up drinking with that medication. Now, the medication had a warning on the bottle. But he went out, he drove, and he killed someone's mother. That client told me he had no criminal history. He told me over and over and over, he said, just give me whatever they're going to give me. They offered him the max, which was 20 years, and I could not in good conscience, knowing that a jury would not give him the max. The only reason we went to trial is because the prosecutor wanted to be so greedy. That jury did not give him 20. He was willing to take 15 years. I am here to tell you that it is never right to break any of our laws. So the reason that we have gone down the line and the reason that we brought Mr. Romanucci is because we actually have control over CBP and DHS. It's just, and ICE. It's just that these guys don't want to exacerbate, use that control. They sit there and they allow U.S. citizens and non-U.S. citizens to have their rights violated, and that is something within our purview. If I lived in one of your cities, in fact, I am in Dallas. Dallas has a Republican mayor. To be a sanctuary city doesn't necessarily mean that you provide sanctuary. It means that you're not going to do the federal government's job. That's what it means. They are local law enforcement. And what it means is that they are not going to sit there and do the job of federal agents. That is what a sanctuary city means. But to be clear, again, and I have more articles, the city of Houston was not, when you talk about someone being a sanctuary city, it is an official policy that they are following. It can't be that it's one person. It's the official policy of the city. Otherwise, it doesn't work if it's just one person. I will yield. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence.
30 seconds from me just
Okay,
to answer Ms.
I probably broke, by the way, they're not laws. I probably broke all kinds of rules today, just so you know, and I don't care, you know?
When Ms. Crockett said she doesn't have children, so she doesn't know, I mean, we're not wired to process the type of tragedy that we're living. We're not. There are no words. I will tell you, it does feel different when an illegal immigrant kills your children than it does an American, because it was preventable. It feels different. Not that I know that because I have had an American kill a child, but when something's preventable and your life is ruined from something that's preventable, it does hit a little different than what I would imagine it would feel like just a regular casualty. Loss in itself is so difficult. There's no words. Loss is loss. It is very tragic. What we're dealing with when it's preventable, when these people have done something and they weren't asked to leave, if I were to go to Honduras, where the woman who killed our children is from, and I would kill 2 teenagers there, I'm not getting any rights from the Hondurans. They're not giving me rights. It's different. This is preventable. So I think it does hit a little different when our tragedy is preventable.
All right, so let's unpack what just happened, because Crockett, I think, made the single most important point of that entire hearing. And it's a point nobody on that side wants to sit with. She said, and I'm paraphrasing, a sanctuary city doesn't mean the city is giving anyone sanctuary. It means the city isn't doing the federal government's job for free. That's it. That's the whole thing. Local cops aren't federal agents. They're not ICE. They weren't hired to be ICE. They weren't trained to be ICE. And the people who elected the mayor didn't vote for ICE. That's literally how federalism works. And look at the article on your screen. This is the actual definition. Sanctuary jurisdictions limit cooperation with federal immigration enforcement so that local cops can focus on community policing. The reasoning is pretty simple. If undocumented people are terrified that calling 911 gets them deported, they stop reporting crimes. They stop being witnesses. And the whole city gets less safe, citizens included. Crockett nailed this. The party that built its entire brand on get the feds out of my town is now the party demanding the feds run your town. You cannot have it both ways. Pick one. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you the families testifying don't have real pain. They do. Miss Heiling lost her kids. That's the worst thing that can happen to a human being. Full stop. But here's where Crockett's point actually lands. And I don't think she got the credit she deserved. She said, with a lot of grace I might add, the pain of losing a child doesn't change based on who the perpetrator is. Loss is loss. And that's not a cold take. That's an honest one. Because the second you make the standard preventability, you open a door the other side really does not want to walk through. And that's exactly what this next piece gets at. Families testifying. Heartbreaking stories. Nobody disputes that. But here's the thing. According to the National Institute of Justice, the research arm of the DOJ itself, undocumented immigrants are arrested at less than half the rate of native-born U.S. citizens for violent crimes. Half. A Stanford and UC Davis study found immigrants are 60% less likely to be incarcerated than U.S.-born citizens. And from 1980 to 2022, the immigrant share of the population more than doubled, while the total crime rate dropped 60.4%. So if we're making federal policy based on preventable deaths, the math doesn't point where this hearing pointed. Not even close. Which brings me to the Laken-Riley Act. And this is where it gets, I don't know, kind of dystopian. The act was signed in January 2025. First, Bill Trump signed. On paper, simple. Undocumented person gets arrested for theft or burglary. ICE has to detain them. Sounds reasonable if you don't read the fine print. But here's the fine print. The law doesn't require a conviction. It requires an arrest, or even a charge. That's it. Somebody accuses you, you get detained. No bond hearing, no judge. Gone. That's not due process. That's the opposite of due process. And look at what the article says the law was sold as. Closing loopholes, preventing escalation. That's the pitch. Here's the reality. According to DHS itself, over 17,500 people have been detained under this law in year one. ICE's own internal memo estimated the first year cost at $26.9 billion. $26 billion. To detain people who, again, commit crimes at half the rate of citizens. And the law covers DACA recipients, TPS holders, even asylum applicants who are here legally. That is not closing a loophole. That is a $26 billion net. So here's the line. Use it. A sanctuary city doesn't give anyone sanctuary. It just means local cops aren't working a second shift as unpaid federal immigration agents, which is literally how the founders designed this country to work. The Laken-Riley Act costs $26 billion a year to detain a population that, according to the DOJ's own research, commits crimes at half the rate of citizens. And the party that built its whole identity on local control just spent a whole hearing demanding Washington override your mayor. Crockett called it exactly what it is. Political theater using grieving families as props. That's not policy. That's not accountability. That's a show. If this helped, like, subscribe, share it with somebody who needs the receipts. I'm Donald Taylor. I'll see you in the next one.